So, um, there we go. Well, I want to introduce Joe Blaty. Am I pronouncing that right, Joe Blaty?
Blaty.
Blaty, very good. Yeah, Joe, I want to thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me. I've wanted to do something like this for a while to discuss something that's really relevant at the moment, which is putting the brakes on AI. Not exactly as it stands, putting the brakes on AI, but discussing how we should have a cautious overview and a cautious understanding of what the future may hold, and with your background, and then what you want to do with your future career, and then just looking at the future. I would love for you to just talk a little bit about your background and why you've decided to talk about this, and why AI for you is potentially like a future career.
Oh, great. Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and um, I'm going to have fun with this topic because it's near and dear to me. Only because I'm an innovation guy. I like to look at uh, getting people to come to their own solutions, helping them innovate and bringing in emerging technologies. So for me, this topic of AI is very relevant to today. It is, when you talk about emerging technologies, that's the first thing that comes to your mind and a lot of people's minds. So a lot of businesses now are concerned about how AI is going to play in their business in the next few years, maybe 10 years, how it's going to transform their businesses, both digitally and from a people perspective. And I like to take the people first approach, so the human side of innovation and bringing that to the forefront to make sure that the businesses understand that the culture is changing as well as the technology.
Awesome, very good, and that was a good overview. So, why should people be worried? Like putting the brakes on AI, there's a lot of relevant news bites out there at the moment, or very new news bites out there with the open letter from lots of industry subject matter experts and billionaires who get a lot of airtime about why AI is potentially bad for society, or the direction AI is going with the larger companies that really own that space because of the amount of data that they have. Um, so from your perspective, why have this conversation, and why have this conversation now?
So I think it's a really good um, fear-based discussion. I think that we've seen this a lot of times in the past, that when new technology is new and interesting and moving really rapidly, um, as far as an acceptance and figuring out, like maybe creating a little bit of what can we do with this, and the sky's the limit. Well, the sky being the limit often is a fear of the unknown. So what could it do? What could it do positive? What could it do negative? So I think people's perception right now is that there is a green field to play with AI, and that's generating a lot of fear. Um, One thing I wanted to talk about, probably right up front in our discussion, and I think this pretty much frames a lot of the discussion about AI, is that AI is the quality of AI's output is largely dependent on the quality of the input, which is the training, and that is very relevant to a lot of the discussion because um, what people think is that AI is this magic wand that they can type in something and get an answer back, and it is correct. It's the correct answer, and that is not the case. That you have to question the accuracy of the data that you get back, and you also have to question the ethics of what you're getting back, because right now there is no filter about that data, the data is stale as well. So If you're talking about ChatGPT, the data is based on what it learned in September of 2021 and how many things have happened since September of 2021.
Yeah.
Um, so the point there is when you're talking about AI and the accuracy of AI, garbage in, garbage out rules. Without high quality training data, the AI risks learning from biased, inaccurate, or incomplete information, and it leads to unreliable decisions and results. And I think that's what's generating a lot of the fear. In addition, there's a thing called AI hallucination. So that's something that we've seen with ChatGPT and a lot of the transformers. Um, Hallucination in the context of AI refers to generation of content that is not based in real world data or accurate representation. So it's actually kind of like you hallucinating and saying that this is fact, and it's giving you what it thinks is factual information, but it's actually a hallucination.
That's interesting. So kind of like an echo chamber almost.
Yes,
Yeah, kind of like an echo chamber, which I think almost everybody has can hold up their hand and say that they've fallen into their own echo chamber, whether it's internal dialogue or hanging out with people that just are almost like self-fulfilling prophets for what you want as an outcome, like an agony aunt, as the colloquial term would
exactly.
be from where I'm from. But that thing, I have not heard of that concept. I'm glad you used the term garbage in, garbage out. I used to work for a company that was big in on data inputs, and they would use not so much garbage, but like a worse word, for in and out, and for like the result of bad information being put into a system. Um, and
Yep,
it's not even bad. It can be like nefarious.
yep.
it can be like something that's like not non-ethical or not ethical. And I wanted to focus just very quickly on the industries where you see potentially the most opportunity, let's say, negative opportunity for ethics to really run amok, and for it to be really bad for society. Because I think ultimately, if AI is going to work globally and societally, it has to be human first. So I think that is
Absolutely.
very important. I think that's very important to kind of about AI, that if it's human first AI and how it can make the human experience better, that is going to mean that AI will probably be adopted by everybody. If we start to see nefarious instances and examples, and I would love, this is coming to a question for you, is where do you see it most likely becoming, uh, where skepticism will grow?
So I think the one of the largest concerns about AI, and this probably comes with some pop cultural references because the media has dealt with the onset of AI with the Terminator, series and iRobot and some of the other examples over time. And people, what they saw was, a kind of a dramatization of AI running amok. So I think it's a kind of you should kind of throw that aside because those things are film. Those are like fiction. Um, but there is some truth to those. So there is. So I don't want to say that like completely throw it away. But what I'm saying is that it's not that scary.
Yeah.
It is. There is incremental steps before it's going to get to that point. And a lot of times in the movies, they try to humanize the AI to make it seem like it's making human decisions, and it's not. It does not have a human brain. A human brain has intuition, compassion. Um, a human brain has creativity, and an AI will never have those things. So to answer your question, get back to where we're going with that is I think that one of the largest concerns right now is in the military because AI is globally being used to um, be be used in weapons. So the point there is that if the AI actually decides to make its own decisions about the target of the weapon, then that could potentially, destroy societies. And so I think that from a main concern is putting AI in weapons. Is that controllable? Is that something that um, is are we ready for that? I
Yeah.
think in some of the other industries, I think a lot of in corporate America, I think one of the most common concerns is bias. So you see a lot in the job market now of the use of AI in screening resumes and um, in considering people's backgrounds, and does the AI say that they're good? So what is the basis of the decisions that the AI is making for a candidate that is qualified for the position or not qualified for the position? Um, and is there any bias in the data and the decisions that it's making? So those things are kind of like right now front and center because I see that AI is being used very much so in the job market. In medical science, um, the concern is constantly privacy, right? So you've got a tremendous amount of potential for AI in medicine, and being able to like look at cancer and translate across boundaries and say, look, here's the data that I have on this particular cancer's DNA, and here's the treatments that we've used in Spain or in New Zealand uh, that this particular cancer responds to. And then you can think very much in terms of what the potential option is. It could save lives, but at the same time, you've got to be concerned about the privacy of the information that's being shared along the way. So there are definitely privacy concerns. There are definitely concerns about uh, bias and discrimination. And I have a good example of where the bias came into play. Actually, in 2016, Microsoft ran a bit of an experiment with AI. It was called Tay.ai, and it was basically an AI bot that was on Twitter, and they pulled it down in less than a day because at the end of that time frame, it became a racist mess. It was an awful thing, and the reason
Yeah.
is because it was learning on data that was human data. It was just basically social media posts. So you can
Yeah.
think that very easily that how an AI can go astray if it actually looks at human reactions and bases its data on public human reaction.
Yeah. So I'll play devil's advocate with a few of the examples that you put there to say, to be the like just the you know the other side of the coin, let's say. So with military, for instance, right, we've a lot of conflict around the world at the moment, and it's usually between a superpower and a secondary, not so well built out, infrastructurally led army. And it's usually an occupying force, an intrusive force. So, for instance, we can use the most relevant one, which is Russia versus Ukraine, and there has been a huge loss of life there. Well, there is opportunity for AI to facilitate a conflict with as little loss of life as possible if, let's say, the intrusive occupying force, that was part of their value system. You could look at like Israel and Palestine, and in terms of how they use the rockets going into each other's areas of society, right? There's like, if you build AI, you want to go to the least densely populated area but the highest military. They're just things to look at in terms of like the reverse, because I don't think you're going to get rid of military conflict through
Correct.
using AI. And then from a job seeker perspective, I see a lot of a lot of people complaining about the we can call it like customer experience, but the talent experience, where you apply for a job and you don't get the right feedback. Whether it's we don't believe it's you get a lot of we think you're a good fit for this role, you should apply, but the aftercare or the after you've applied touch points and reasons for not being considered generally tend to be robotic, and it's not really human first. So I think these are all limitations today that, and they're just few. I think the help is the most interesting one, which you can really flesh out, because there are real true life instances of real good success in spotting cancer where like human eyes through like radiology. For instance, something is missed. I heard about an example. I can't really cite it right now, of like someone who had a dog who used, I think it was ChatGPT, and put in all of the symptoms that their pet had, and ChatGPT 3.5 wasn't able to figure out that it was cancer, but ChatGPT 4 was. And the vet said it wasn't cancer, that the dog just had some underlying illness and they needed to keep taking medication. And it turned out, no, they actually had like a cancer that they were able to save the dog with. They were able to cut it out. So yeah, I think that from everything you mentioned, there is huge scope for positive growth in that area with AI. It's just how do you build that value system, that cultural first, human first approach. So that's awesome. From all that, and we talked a little bit about pitfalls, and I do want to talk about some of the stuff that you've written, and kind of talked about that's attached to your LinkedIn page, and we'll attach it to this after we post this on LinkedIn. There's a few terms that you use. You kind of talked about AI. That AI has actually been talked about and has been I suppose quantifiable since like the 70s, and then
Yes.
there was like an AI winter, and then you also mentioned, and it's a Gartner term, it's like the hype cycle, and you believe we're in like a trough right now. So can you just give us like your Cliff Notes on the AI, 70s, 80s kind of winter time, and then why you think we're in a trough right now, and just that whole hype cycle?
Sure. Uh, the AI winter was actually after a period in the late 60s and mid 70s, where the interest and the funding of AI research kind of declined due to limitations. That there were a lot of hardware limitations in what AI could do. It could not. It was not Sorry, it was not up to the level of matching anything close to what human intelligence, human capabilities could do. So AI kind of like dropped into a trough of disillusionment because, hey, here's this tremendous promise, and it wasn't realized because we didn't have the capabilities to support the hype. That kind of goes back to Gartner's hype cycle, which is highly criticized because it's not really a cycle, but
Yeah,
it is it's more of a curve,
yeah, well,
and
like like a
right,
graph. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
What happens is it starts out with a technological a trigger. So there's an interest and maybe a capability, and that skyrockets up on the top to the top of a curve, and then that's like the peak of expectations. So a peak of inflated expectations. So it's the best thing since sliced bread, and then it can pretty much solve any problem, and then there's a trough of dissolution, but it has these problems, these side effects. um, then you start people starting to like not invest as much in a technology, and then like everybody said, okay, well, it was our expectations were here, but it didn't live up to any of those. So then you're at the bottom of the curve and you say, okay, well, now we know what it really is. Now, so what are now we going to do with it? At the bottom of the curve, that's the trough of disillusionment. You decide, okay, are we going to abandon this? Does it not make sense to even proceed, or do you do we find a way to leverage it, move it forward, and find some middle of the road and avoid all of the negative consequences or side effects? So that's what happened with AI Winter. Essentially, I think what happened was we kind of maybe in between a little bit abandoned it, and or it just went on like hiatus for a long period of time because it went silent, like radio silent, for at least a decade. And then researchers continued to make uh, breakthroughs in AI and saw resurgence, maybe in the 80s. And then now more recently we have Chat GPT, which kind of started a new, and that's maybe November, I would say, is when it started to really kind of gain that, wow, this is really cool. Let's try to
Mhm.
leverage this new technology. That was that technology trigger that I was talking about. Um, and now we're kind of at the top, well, kind of going back down into the trough because we've said, okay, great stuff, sliced bread, did all of this stuff. Uh, it's the solution to everything. It's going to be the new user interface. I've heard a lot of that stuff. And then
Yeah,
now we're back down to, oh, but it could destroy humanity, and that's a pretty big
yeah,
one. So we're back into
yeah.
the trough of disillusionment and trying to figure out, okay, what's the way next? So where are we going to go? Are we going to take this? Are we going to abandon it again? Which I don't think is going to happen because there's too much interest in it. Um, but there's going to have to be some ethical way forward that we leverage this to make the best of it.
That's okay. That's really good. Just a few points on that. I think that's great. To kind of summarize where we're at right now and the history of AI. Like a follow up question or a kind of comment that with a question kind of tied in. I think from working with people that have been involved in data science, data management for a very long time, that AI was always a conversation about how to automate things, right? How to make things more efficient by using the data sets in a business model, like working with big financial services, big telecom companies that I have in the past. And AI would always come up. I think what's made it relevant today is something like ChatGPT, Alexa, like in the last few years, and ChatGPT has just accelerated it again as to, oh, this actually could make life easier. It could also, get rid of like teachers' jobs
Yeah.
potentially because of just how easy plagiarism can come to, like something like, hey, write, something about I don't know, like Macbeth the play and give me like a summarization, and that's what I have to give in to my teacher, just stuff like that. We're all worried about that, and that is a true concern. But then also it saves people like hours of time, and we are acutely aware that it's one of the very few resources you can never get back is time. So, from kind of like that perspective, and talking about like a peak and we're kind of in a trough and hopefully are coming out of it. Where do you see the overarching management of AI? Like, as in, how do we manage AI? How do we go about even putting a plan in place to manage AI? And I know you talk about this in your article, and I kind of think it's a good segue into that.
Yeah, so I think it, the technology may be moving faster than how we know to put guardrails around it. So I think that we as a society have to grow as well psychologically as well as the technology is growing, because ultimately any regulation, anything that we use as a guardrail from a regulatory perspective only impacts people. It doesn't impact technology. So it
Yeah,
so it is, it's important to realize that if we're going to be an ethical society, then and we're going to put guardrails around the technology, then it's up to us to enforce the rules that we set for it. And so you have to actually, you can build some of those rules and some of those ethics into the technology itself, which it doesn't have right now. It doesn't have that level of ethics. It doesn't have a like an AI Bill of Rights,
Yeah.
but or any type of moral code that it's basing its answers around. But
So do you mind if I just
it's
jump in a second,
yeah.
just 1 second, because this is interesting, and I was listening to something on this yesterday, uh, and someone referred to it from an AI standpoint as outsourcing moral intuition. How do you outsource moral intuition to an AI? So what you're doing is essentially giving them the right to be the judge, jury, and maybe executioner in the front when you wake up one day and Skynet and the robots are at your front door. But uh, like the outsing of moral intuition, there's so many like prickly points there.
Yep.
And you're talking about, that's what you're talking about right now, is essentially like there's no moral intuition attached to AI. Would you ever see a future like that where AI is making the decisions, like the all-encompassing decisions?
So I fear that because honestly, and that kind of goes back to your people first thing. I think of AI as a co-pilot. So AI is a great way to look at large data sets and give you some of the decision making factors. But the you part of that has to stay you. So, in other words, there still has to be a human making the decisions. You're just going to have a lot more data points and a lot more uh, identified risk to say, hey, I understand this. I can make a qualified decision based on what the AI has helped me decide. So I think it's still got to be people first. It's still got to be human centric. AI is not making the decisions. It's just helping you make the decisions.
Okay. So it really is automated general intelligence and not artificial intelligence per se,
Correct.
today. Okay. Um, there's a lot of we're talking a lot about the negatives, and we've talked a little bit about the pros. From a like global societal, and we talked a little bit about this when we first met, was like constitutional AI. How do you go about doing that now? And I know there's things in the news that we'll touch on, but I mean from a global standpoint, more so than a national or sovereign standpoint or a local standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. So constitutional AI is a pretty interesting concept. It was actually that we talked about it in the congressional hearings last week, and it was proposed by a company called Anthropic AI. Um, they were a group of employees that left OpenAI and created this new startup in 2021. And essentially, what they said was, we build reliable, interpretable, steerable AI systems. So they're they're a competitor to ChatGPT, but with a mission to be helpful, harmless, and honest. So you can actually see their product on poe.com, which is Claude. The product's name is Claude.
Cool.
And it is essentially reinforcement learning with AI. So ChatGPT was based on reinforcement learning with humans. So in other words, you while it was being trained, ChatGPT would use humans to say, here's my prompt, and here's another version of that prompt, and here's another version of the prompt, and humans would look at those versions and rank them as you know the ones that least were abrasive, least human impactive, harmless, etc. So it was human beings behind the scenes, but whenever you have humans, like I was talking about with Tay earlier, whenever you have humans injected into the equation, there's going to be bias, there's going to be discrimination, there's going to be all of the things that make us human, probably some of the negative things that make us human, are going to be injected into what it learns. Um, the difference with constitutional AI is that it uses an AI to check the output of AI against a quote unquote constitution. So um, you essentially give the AI um, a a set of rules to work from. So what is abrasive language? What is illegal? What is harmful? What is so all of the different aspects of that, and essentially what it does is the AI, as it's learning, checks itself against that constitution, that set of rules, and um, looks at the prompts and judges it and modifies the prompts to make it uh, less abrasive, less harmful, and take all of the illegal activity out of it.
Okay. So kind of some of the stuff that you're seeing on social media sites today, social media platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, illegal, bias, erroneous type of language. That constitutional AI, let's say, it's 100 of the world's subject matter experts slash leaders slash I'm talking about globally. I know that there's like a smaller regional plans in place right now, but it would have to be continuously changing, like on a day-to-day basis almost.
Absolutely, it has to
Yeah,
adapt.
yeah,
It but so it's grounded in basic human values, right? So constitutional AI is it, it is based on a set of rules that are human value based. Those values probably won't change, but how humanity evolves and how the AI evolves, you'd have to constantly update that set of rules. I think
yeah,
that the basic foundation of it is that humanity has a basic set of rules, and actually that's kind of what constitutional AI is right now, is based on like some of the things that we as humanity have come up with over time that are basic human rights, and a moral code. Maybe not a religious in the religious sense of the word, but these are the things that we as humans value,
yeah,
and then try um, to put that into a language model and just say, look, here's are the things that humanity values. Make your answers or modify your answers to so that the responses are consistent with that rule system.
yeah. So like a very not loose, but high level, not very specific or nuanced set of like value and rule based systems. So you're not stifling progress and you're not stifling interaction or creativity, but enough to not have like an ongoing problem with hate speech or an ongoing problem with like threatening language or legal use. In conceptually, it's a really good idea, not too dissimilar to what the US and certain European countries have in terms of their constitution. And that is a democracy type of tool set to run a large society. So that's pretty cool. If you think about it long enough, and the potential outcomes, you could think of a constitutional AI replacing large parts of like the governments that we have today that are very cumbersome and move slowly towards certain ideas and decisions, which isn't good because like that's displacement of people. So there's an ongoing kind of conversation there too. Um, this is
Well,
this is
so I
awesome.
think that as far as the government decisions are concerned, I think that then you start to because you're talking about representing people, right? So then again, you've got to take a people first approach. And I think that the AI can help look at large data sets, like I said, and maybe if you've got whole data from your different districts in your country, and you say, okay, well, here's what the people said. The AI can crunch that data down and give you some kind of like generic idea of the people, what the people value, and then you can start to make decisions based like on how am I going to change the laws, how am I going to invest
Yeah.
money, the tax money, to best satisfy the the opinions of those people, what do they value. But I don't think that the AI is a replacement for government again.
No, I think it's more of a co-pilot, people first co-pilot, and I mean that not as a replacement from a representation standpoint. I mean it more as more of a people first, because I think that like from a centralized standpoint, I think a smaller centralized control is actually a good thing, but still having a lot of power because of interactions and ability to move forward without having to go through like a long bureaucracy or bureaucratic system that could take months or years, and then someone else has already done it. And then there's like I think that there's like there's arguments there, I think for having something like that to basically make large taking large data sets and not having people kind of sift through information. It's like a procurement system for a very large organized, like a very large organization that has a very slow moving decision-making process. The last thing I want to talk.
Just remember that, like I said before, the quality, you got to be concerned about the quality of the data. It's because garbage in, garbage out. So if someone has the ability to manipulate that data, then then your whole system breaks down. The whole downstream system breaks down. So you got to be concerned about the security and the quality of the data that you're looking at, even if it's in your particular use case that you were talking about in government.
Yeah. And that makes sense, and that's where I think liability and agency will come into play from a true legal standpoint. And there's like some points there that I actually wanted to get into, but we're kind of running
Sure.
on time.
Yep.
We're kind of running on time here because the software, the algorithms. If let's say someone uses an algorithm for a different product that's related to AI and it's used in a nefarious way, who becomes responsible? Is it the person that created it or the person that repurposes it? Are they both liable? There's a lot of there's just so many things. Yeah, there's so much accountability because, like we said, AI is actually automated intelligence as of today, or used mainly as automated intelligence. So it doesn't have agency. You're not going to flip off a switch as like the death penalty for AI, right? That's the kind of conversations that are going to be going on for I think years. My biggest concern is after doing my little bit of research on this is that it's going to breed mental laziness in the future, which kind of worries me, right? Because you're outsourcing everything to AI, and that
kind of goes back to that whole society. We have to make some decisions from a societal perspective and how we're going to use AI, because if we treat it as a replacement for thinking, then that's what it will become. I think we're kind of like creating our own destiny as a society. So I hear what you say, and we could get to that point if we don't start to think how we're going to transform. So whenever you have new technology, you got to think about the culture. What are the cultural impacts? What are the people impacts of it? How is humanity going to transform to accept this new technology? So to your point, we could say, let's let it replace our brain. We don't have to think about anything anymore. We'll fire all of the people that are currently our administrative assistants, because the AI does it for us. We can just have the AI do it for us. And if that is your directive, then that is your destiny. You're building your own destiny. What I think we need to do as a society is to say, how do we use it ethically, and how do we adapt as a culture to best use it, but still maintain that we have brains, and we have to continue to grow.
Yeah, and that again coming back to like planning for the future, and as humans we're pretty bad at planning.
Exactly.
Or at least understanding what the future looks like and having timelines to kind of follow. But this has been great. This has been very interesting, and I would love to talk about this again in the
Absolutely.
maybe towards the end of the year, and we can kind of pick a topic and really kind of delve into it. This was just like a good overview from a philosophical and future versus like historical standpoint. So I really appreciate your time. And we'll
Likewise.
link everything to your research once we post this. Okay.
Loved it. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
no,
it.
it's great. Thanks, Joe. Take care.
You too.